When David tearfully confessed to cheating on me, I acted completely shocked and devastated. But the truth is, I'd known about his affair with Melissa for 6 months and had been quietly preparing my revenge. Now they're both unemployed, single, and have absolutely no idea how it all happened. You guys, I'm still shaking as I type this. Like, I can't even believe I actually pulled this off. My hands are literally trembling right now because what happened is so insane. But here's the thing. This isn't even the craziest part. What happened next will shock you even more, and I'll tell you about that at the very end because honestly, even I can't believe it actually worked. So, David and I have been married for 8 years, right? We met in college, both studying business, and I thought we had this perfect little life going. He got this job at some consulting firm. I work in marketing. We bought this cute house in the suburbs. You know, the whole American dream thing that everyone's supposed to want. About a year ago, David's company hired this new executive assistant named Melissa. 25 years old, fresh out of college, blonde, bubbly, basically everything I'm not. David started mentioning her all the time, like constantly. Always going on about how organized she was, how efficient, how smart. I was like, okay, cool. Glad you found a good assistant, whatever. But then things got weird. Like, really weird. The first red flag happened around Christmas last year. David suddenly started working late all the time, and I mean all the time. He'd come home and be like, oh, I had to help train Melissa on these complex client files. The workload is absolutely insane right now. And here's the thing about liars, you guys. They over-explain everything. David suddenly became like this detailed reporter about his entire day. He'd tell me exactly what meetings he went to, what he ate for lunch, who he talked to in the bathroom. It was like he was creating an alibi for every single minute of his day. Then came the phone thing. Oh my God, the phone thing. You know how when someone becomes super secretive with their phone? Like David started taking that thing everywhere. And I mean everywhere. To the bathroom, to bed, even when he went to get the mail. He'd get these texts at like midnight and be like, oh, it's just a work emergency. Don't worry about it. After 8 years of marriage, this man changed his passcode. 8 years! We used to share everything. The breaking point came 6 months ago when I was cleaning our home office. I found this receipt that had fallen behind his desk. It was from Romano's, that super expensive steakhouse downtown. Dinner for two, champagne, dessert, the whole romantic package. $300. And the date? It was the exact night David told me he was working late on some big presentation for their biggest client. But here's what I didn't know yet. That receipt was going to be the key to absolutely everything that happened next. I'll explain how later, but first, let me tell you what I found out next, because it gets so much worse. I could have confronted him right then, you know? Could have been like, hey, what's this receipt? Why are you lying to me? But something in my gut told me to dig deeper. Maybe it was how he'd been treating me lately. Distant, impatient, like I was just this annoying roommate he was stuck with instead of his wife. So I decided to become a detective. And let me tell you, I got good at it. I started paying attention to literally everything. His schedule, his moods, what he wore to work. I noticed he'd been dressing way better lately, buying new cologne, even started working out more. Classic cheating husband behavior, right? But I needed actual proof. Here's where my job in digital marketing came in handy. I know a thing or two about tracking and data analysis, so I installed this keylogger program on our shared computer, the one David sometimes used for personal stuff. Totally legal since it's our computer. I also put a GPS tracker on his car, which is also legal since the car is in my name too. What I found out over the next few weeks literally made me sick to my stomach. David wasn't just having innocent lunch meetings with Melissa. They were going to hotels in the middle of the day, like actual hotels. They had regular dinner dates at restaurants all over town. The GPS showed his car parked at her apartment complex multiple times a week, sometimes for hours. But what I found next was so much worse, and it completely changed everything about my plan. I can't tell you yet because it's connected to something that happens at the very end of this story, but trust me, it's insane. The keylogger revealed stuff that made me want to throw up. David had created this whole secret email account just to talk to Melissa. And these weren't work emails, you guys. They were planning weekend getaways together, talking about their future, even discussing how to handle the situation with me. In one email, David literally wrote that he was waiting for the right time to ask for a divorce because he needed to figure out the financial stuff first. But honestly, the worst part was how sloppy they were being. Like, did they think I was completely stupid? Melissa would comment on David's Facebook posts with heart emojis. She'd like every single photo he posted. They'd check into the same places on social media just minutes apart. It was like they wanted to get caught, or they thought I was too dumb to notice. Instead of confronting them like a normal person would do, I made a decision. I was going to document absolutely everything and plan my exit strategy, but I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. If David wanted to play games, I was going to play them better. First thing I did? I hired a private investigator. Yeah, it was expensive as hell, but I needed professional documentation of their affair. Photos, videos, detailed reports of where they went and what they did. This PI was worth every single penny. He got footage of them at multiple hotels, fancy restaurants, even this weekend trip to Napa Valley that David told me was a work conference. A work conference. Can you believe that? While I was gathering all this evidence, I also started protecting myself financially. I opened a new bank account that only I had access to and started moving small amounts of money from our joint accounts. Nothing crazy, just enough to build an emergency fund without David noticing. I also made copies of all our important financial documents and stored them in a safety deposit box that David had no idea about. The hardest part was acting normal every single day. Every morning I'd kiss David goodbye and tell him to have a good day, knowing he was going to spend it with his mistress. Every evening I'd ask about his day and listen to his lies with a smile on my face. Honestly, I should get an Oscar for my performance during those months. I also started making some moves at work. Applied for this promotion I'd been putting off, updated my resume, started networking like crazy. If this marriage was ending, I needed to be financially stable on my own. 3 months into my investigation, I found something that changed absolutely everything. Melissa wasn't just David's side piece, she was actively helping him plan our divorce. I found emails where they talked about hiding assets, minimizing alimony payments, even strategies for making me look like an unfit wife in court. David was literally plotting with his affair partner to screw me over financially. That's when I decided David wasn't just going to lose a wife. He was going to lose everything. I started documenting every single asset we owned, every account, every investment. I researched divorce law like it was my full-time job and talked to 3 different attorneys to understand my rights. I also started keeping this detailed diary of David's behavior, his lies, his absences. Everything was going into my revenge file. But I wanted more than just a good divorce settlement. I wanted justice. Here's where my marketing background really came in handy. I knew David's company had this super strict ethics policy about workplace relationships, especially between supervisors and subordinates. David was technically Melissa's boss, which made their relationship a major violation of company policy. Even better, they were using company resources for their affair. Company time, company credit cards for their hotel hookups, even company phones for their personal calls. I spent weeks gathering evidence of their professional misconduct. The PI helped me document their daytime hotel visits during work hours. I tracked every single company credit card charge that seemed personal instead of business related. I even found out that David had been giving Melissa raises and bonuses that were completely unjustified based on her actual performance. 4 months into my investigation, I had built this absolutely airtight case. Professional photos and videos of their affair, financial records showing misuse of company funds, emails proving they were planning to defraud me in the divorce, and documentation of their violation of workplace policies. But I still wasn't ready to destroy them yet. I wanted David to confess voluntarily. I wanted him to lie to my face one more time so I could show him exactly who he was dealing with. I started dropping these subtle hints that I suspected something. I'd mentioned that he seemed distant lately, that I felt like we weren't connecting anymore. I'd ask about Melissa casually, like, "Oh, I'd love to meet this amazing assistant you're always talking about." David would get so nervous, then overcompensate with fake affection, digging himself deeper into his web of lies. 2 weeks ago, I decided it was time to spring my trap. I told David I wanted to plan this romantic weekend getaway to reconnect with each other. He looked absolutely panicked, probably because it would mess up his time with Melissa. He made all these excuses about work being too busy, but I kept pushing. Then I did something evil. I booked us a trip to the exact same resort where he'd taken Melissa the month before. The look on his face was priceless. The Friday before our supposed trip, David came home looking absolutely miserable. He sat me down in the living room, took my hands in his, and started crying. Real tears, you guys. When David began speaking, he said he'd made a terrible mistake. He told me he'd been unfaithful and that he couldn't live with the guilt anymore. David confessed to having an affair with Melissa, saying it had been going on for 6 months. He begged for my forgiveness, swearing it was over. David claimed he'd already ended things with her and wanted to work on our marriage. When I asked him if he loved her, David said it was just a mistake and that I was the only woman he truly loved. He even offered to quit his job and start over somewhere else. I played my part perfectly, you guys. I cried, I screamed, I threw some stuff around. I asked all the questions a betrayed wife would ask. How long? How many times? Do you love her? Was I not good enough? David answered everything, spinning this whole story about how lost and confused he'd been, how Melissa had pursued him, how he'd never meant for it to happen. But here's what David didn't know I knew. And this is where that receipt I found becomes crucial. Remember I said it was the key to everything? Well, what David didn't tell me during his confession will blow your mind. And it's connected to something that happened just this morning. I'm saving that revelation for the end, because you need to hear everything else first. But here's what David didn't tell me during his tearful confession. That he'd only confessed because Melissa had given him an ultimatum. Melissa wanted him to leave me and move in with her, and she was threatening to expose their affair to his boss if he didn't. David wasn't confessing out of guilt. He was trying to control the narrative before it exploded in his face. I knew all this because the PI had recorded their breakup conversation 2 days earlier. When Melissa realized David wasn't going to leave me, she said something that I still can't believe. She told David she had a backup plan that would destroy both of us if he didn't choose her. I'm not going to tell you what that plan was yet, because what happened when I confronted her about it will be the most shocking part of this entire story. After David's tearful confession, I told him I needed time to think. When I said I was going to stay at my sister's for a few days to process everything, David seemed relieved. He probably thought he'd bought himself some time to figure out his next move. But what David didn't know was that I'd already planned my next 3 moves, and they were going to destroy him completely. Here's where everything I'd been planning for 6 months finally came together. But the real shock? What I'm about to tell you isn't even the biggest bombshell. That's coming at the very end, and it involves something that happened just last week that changes everything you think you know about this story. Instead of going to my sister's, I went home the next morning while David was at work. I packed all my important stuff, cleaned out my secret bank account, and loaded everything into a moving truck. Then I left David this letter explaining that I was filing for divorce and that he should only contact me through my attorney. But you guys, that was just the beginning. Monday morning, I sent this comprehensive report to David's HR department documenting his affair with a subordinate, the misuse of company resources, and all their violations of company ethics policies. I included photos, financial records, emails, and this detailed timeline of their entire relationship. I also sent copies of everything to Melissa's supervisor, along with documentation showing how she'd been getting unearned raises and bonuses in exchange for sleeping with her boss. That's quid pro quo sexual harassment, by the way, which is totally a fireable offense. By Tuesday, both David and Melissa had been suspended pending investigation. By Friday, they were both fired for gross misconduct. But wait, there's more. Remember those company credit card charges for their hotel hookups? Turns out using company funds for personal expenses is considered embezzlement. David's company filed charges with the district attorney's office. Nothing's been decided yet, but David's facing potential felony charges. The divorce proceedings have been absolutely satisfying. My attorney presented all the evidence of David's planned financial fraud, his hidden assets, and his plan to screw me over in the settlement. The judge was not impressed. I'm getting the house, half of all assets, and substantial alimony. David's also paying all my legal fees. Melissa didn't take losing her job very well. She tried to blame everything on David, claiming he'd sexually harassed her and threatened her job if she didn't sleep with him. But my evidence clearly showed she was an eager participant who'd helped plan my financial ruin. Her reputation in our industry has made finding another job pretty much impossible. The best part? David's family finally saw who he really was. His parents, who'd always treated me like I wasn't good enough for their precious son, called to apologize after I showed them all the evidence. His sister, who'd been cold to me for years, sent me a care package and this note saying she was ashamed of her brother's behavior. David tried to call me multiple times after the terminations, begging me to drop the charges and work things out. When David called me crying, he said he'd been manipulated by Melissa. David claimed he'd made a mistake, but didn't deserve to lose everything. That's when I reminded him that I'd only given him exactly what he'd planned to give me. Nothing. But here's where the story takes an even more twisted turn. Remember Melissa's backup plan I mentioned earlier? The one she threatened David with? Well, she actually tried to execute it after she got fired. What she did was so insane, so vindictive, that it makes everything else look like child's play. And the best part? It backfired spectacularly in a way that I never could have planned. The last I heard, David was living in this tiny studio apartment across town, working as a freelance consultant for like a fraction of his previous salary. Melissa moved back in with her parents and is working retail while trying to rebuild her career. As for me, I got that promotion at work. I'm financially stable, living in my beautiful house with my dog, and honestly happier than I've been in years. I've even started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but it's nice to be with people who actually want to be with me. People keep asking if I feel guilty about destroying their lives. The answer is absolutely not. David made his choice when he decided to cheat, lie, and plan to financially ruin me. Melissa made her choice when she decided to help him. They thought they were playing chess while I was playing checkers. Turns out I was playing chess too. I was just way better at it. The crazy thing is, if David had just been honest from the beginning, if he'd come to me and said he was unhappy and wanted a divorce, I probably would have worked with him. We could have split everything fairly and moved on with our lives. Instead, he chose deception and manipulation. Every action has consequences. David and Melissa learned that the hard way. I know some people might think I went too far, that I should have just filed for divorce and moved on, but they don't understand what it's like to find out that the person you trusted most in the world was actively working to destroy you. They weren't just having an affair, they were literally conspiring to steal my future. I protected myself the only way I could. I used the law, I used evidence, and I used their own actions against them. Everything I did was completely legal and totally justified. Today marks 6 months since David's confession and 3 months since our divorce was finalized. I'm writing this from my home office, looking out at the garden I'm finally able to enjoy again. My life isn't perfect, but it's mine. It's honest. It's real. But remember that shocking revelation I promised you about Melissa's backup plan? And that thing that happened last week that changes everything? Here it is. Melissa had been secretly recording David during their entire affair, planning to blackmail him if things went south. She had videos, audio recordings, everything. After she got fired, she tried to sell them to this tabloid blog to destroy both of us publicly. Here's the twist. When the blog editor contacted me for comment, I told him the whole truth about their affair and my investigation. Instead of publishing Melissa's revenge, he published mine. The article went viral, and now Melissa is facing legal action for attempting extortion and revenge porn. The recording she thought would destroy us actually became the final nail in her own coffin. And David? Last week, he called me crying because Melissa's failed blackmail attempt made the local news. When David begged me to help clear his name, I told him exactly what he told me 6 months ago. That's not my problem anymore. Sometimes karma doesn't just come around, it brings friends. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just giving people exactly what they deserve. Thanks for reading my story, you guys. To everyone going through something similar. Document everything, protect yourself financially, and remember that you're stronger than you think. Don't let anyone make you the victim of their choices. And hey, if you enjoyed hearing about karma in action, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Viral Family Tales for more incredible true stories. We post new content every day, so hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below if you think David and Melissa got what they deserved, or if you have your own story of justice served cold. Thanks for watching, and remember, the truth always comes out in the end.